If there are so many different types of psychology and you're looking to study psychology at university, how do you know what to write in your personal statement to get your place? Well, one of the things that I think is really important when you're applying for psychology courses is to make it personal to you. And so today I'm going to talk you through what I did when I applied to study psychology at the University of Cambridge and what I put in my personal statement, because it might not be what you thought would be in a personal statement for a psychology course. Because I wrote about politics, I wrote about history, I wrote about art, I wrote about things that were interesting to me, and I made them connect with psychology. And that's something really important. So we're going to take a little bit of time today just to go through some tips and some thoughts on how to make an absolutely fantastic personal statement with a leaning towards psychology, but gives a real personal touch that says why it needs to be you studying psychology at their university. I also thought I would bring out some of the books that I used in my personal statement, because books are great. I mean, you can tell I love books because of the bookshop by me, but books are so perfect for a personal statement because it shows your launch pad in. It says, where did you start? Why did you read something? When you read it, what did you think? Why did it get you interested? Why did that book then make you want to study even more about it? And by demonstrating what you've already started reading, you're giving an indication of what you naturally lean towards. But it doesn't have to be all about your academic papers. I think that's something which can be a bit overwhelming, actually. If you think about when you're applying to university, you've never done a big academic degree before. That's why you're applying for an undergraduate degree at university. So they don't expect you to know everything. They want to teach you. They just want to be sure that you're the right person for them to teach. Do you already know enough stuff, or have you already expressed enough of an interest to say, do you know what, yeah, well, we're going to give our time to this student. They're going to get everything out of this course. So in my personal statement, I remember starting with some information about my experiences and my volunteering. And that was something that was big for me in terms of why did I want to study psychology. I had been involved in volunteering in residential homes for adults with learning disabilities, and it was a sort of an assisted living setup, and I loved it. I used to go and visit once a week for an hour or so and got to know some of the residents in the home, chatted with them, played games with them, and it really sparked my interest in, well, how do different people develop in different ways? Why do some people go on to have what we consider societally to be an absolutely spot-on, fabulous life? They've ticked every box, they're just amazing, wonderful, creative people. And other people go on a different route and everybody goes, oh, what went wrong? And I thought that was quite a loaded question. What went wrong? Rather than why are people different? Well, why can't we celebrate everybody's individuality? And that was what started my leanings into psychology. What makes people different? What makes people tick? And then I started reading some books. The books then go into the personal statement, just to drip, 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 just to show I read. That's important. They want to know that you read their subject. They don't need to know every book you've ever read. Do not tell them what's on your bookshelf. That's boring as hell. But they do need to know that you've taken some information from somewhere and you've done something with it. I'm going to actually dip out here and find a couple of them. Here's one. So one of the things that I got really interested in was Peter Pan. I don't know if you've ever read any about Jungian psychology. Jungian psychology, one of the big things, he was a student of Marx, and one of the big things about his thinking was all about archetypal personalities, and fairy tales and stories really connect in with this. And I found this book, I don't even know how I found it, Now or Neverland, Peter Pan and the Myth of Eternal Youth, a psychological perspective on a cultural icon. And who's it by? Anne Yeoman. There you go, I don't know if you can see it. So I started reading this and it really connected with me. It was essentially, it's about guys who don't grow up, and it took a story which I thought was actually quite a nice story, Peter Pan, and it made it quite sad. I then read another book about it, which is just here, called The Peter Pan Syndrome. So again, I'm looking at something which interested me. I was studying English literature as one of my A-level choices, so it connects in. Why am I studying psychology and English? Because I connect the two, great. So I've read a book about Now or Neverland, and now I've connected in with something that's a little bit more psychiatric, a little bit more what goes wrong with people, and here's a syndrome that somebody's named after, Peter Pan, the Peter Pan Syndrome, Men Who Have Never Grown Up, Dr. Dan Kiley. And can't say it was my favourite book on earth, it certainly wasn't, but it was interesting how he used Jungian psychology, how he used Peter Pan as his sort of crutch, and demonstrated that actually there are some men who stay in this sort of needy, childlike state forever, and connected it in. So, 2 books which sort of connected in. It gave a story. I started with one, I led into the other, and they went into my personal statement. They gave something for me to talk about in my interview. Now, if you're applying to a university like Cambridge, which I was, then you're going to have an interview, so you've got to be ready to talk about something. But that wasn't all I read about. For example, I'll come back round. I read this. This is a history book. Not very much to do with psychology, but it's called Ordinary Men, Reserve Police Battalion 101 and the Final Solution in Poland by Christopher R. Browning. Very interesting book, by the way, and at the time I wasn't particularly interested in history. I had dropped history at the end of year 9 with great delight. I was really pleased to drop history. It really wasn't for me. I also dropped geography. I was told once upon a time, oh, you've got to do either geography or history. Forget that, you don't have to do either of them. But anyway, this is in 1942, a unit of ordinary middle-aged German reserve policemen were ordered to liquidate a Jewish village. Most of them had never fired a shot at a human being before, yet they killed with little hesitation and eventually went on to slaughter tens of thousands in cold blood. How could this transformation have taken place? And that is a huge question. And it's a psychological question, as I'm sure you will automatically have recognized there. If you've started a psychology course already, you'll probably be ding, 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 ding with things like Milgram and his electric shock experiment, with things like Zimbardo and the Stanford Prison experiment. There are so many massive psychological studies that come out of questions like this. How did ordinary people do extraordinarily, appallingly bad things? And that was fascinating to me about psychology. Now, we, in this channel, and if you've watched other videos, then you maybe have got a hint of this. There are different types of psychology, and we have touched on lots of different types before. There's cognitive psychology, there's social psychology, psychodynamic, Jungian, which we've chatted about just before, and they're all very different, and you're not going to necessarily be that keen on studying all of them. And you're going to have to do a bit of most of them, especially if you want to do an accredited course, but you're likely to have a leaning one way or the other. And for me, it was social developmental psychology. They were my big areas. I wanted to see how people worked together, and I wanted to see how that changes through time over a lifetime. So I knew that I wanted to be able to reflect that in my personal statement. I needed to connect into the story. Why did I want to study where I wanted to study, which was Cambridge, which specialises really in that social developmental stuff? So I needed to connect in my story to that. Now, you might be studying, applying to study somewhere where they're really focusing neuroscience and cognitive psychology. Well, you're going to need to demonstrate to them why you're the right student for them. Maybe you've continued biology at A level, and so you're going to connect in some biological stuff. I dropped biology. I was useless at it. So I dropped biology, I dropped history, I dropped geography. What was I still doing? I was doing art, and that one was an interesting one. If your school has said to you, don't do this subject because it's a blacklisted subject, it's a subject that you just can't do if you want to get into this course in this place, stop for a moment. It's not necessarily true. Now, I can see why certain subjects are better than others to do depending on what your ultimate aims are, but I did not want to drop art. I really absolutely loved art. It was an outlet for me, and I also was quite good at it. I loved it, so I wasn't going to drop it. But I did need to find a way to demonstrate why it was a valuable course for me to be still studying at A level. And so I made sure that in my personal statement, I addressed that elephant in the room. Because otherwise, it may well have looked to the people reading my application that I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't know why I'd connected things up. They don't expect you to know all of your answers and have everything joined together. But it's useful to demonstrate what your thinking is at the time. And so for me, with art, I connected it in with perception, which is another area of psychology where really your brain does all of your seeing, your brain does your thinking and feeling, and it uses the body as its tools to get information. Well, art is in most cases, visual piece of information. Your eyes see something, but they don't see very well, but your brain sees something even clearer. It adds in semantic messages, it adds in feelings, emotions, memories, connections, societal meaning. It's huge and it's psychological. And so I was able to connect in the art and clearly demonstrate why I felt that art was a valuable A-level for me to take. So if you are taking an A-level that's looking a little bit odd alongside your other choices, just have a stop and think. It might actually be relevant and it might make you a more individual and standout candidate. You don't need to be a cookie cutter of every other candidate going. A number one tip in this talk about your application. If you put anything in your personal statement, like a book, make sure you've read it. You have to read it. You cannot read a précis of it. You cannot go onto SparkNotes and just take their word for it. Read the book. Pick a book that you are actually interested in. Pick it up, get it in the library, order it online, but read it. Because I had a friend who applied to Oxford, had said to them that he had read a particularly impressive book. He had not read it. I think he'd read the first couple of chapters. And of course, they asked him questions about it. Because that's what you put your personal statement in front of them for. You're saying to them, I want to be asked questions about this. This is what I like talking about. This is how I'm going to impress you. Why would you make it up? So make sure whatever you put on your personal statement, make sure you've got something to say about it. And my final piece of advice in this video is I recommend having something extra to say that you haven't put in your personal statement. So don't put everything you know or everything you've read in your personal statement. Because when you get to talking to them and they ask you that one step further question, and you then say, oh, but I've told you everything I know, what am I supposed to do? No, say something back, hold something, be intriguing. It's like a flirtation, be intriguing. If you've read something about, in my instance, ordinary men, the idea of these ordinary people doing horrible things, what's something else that you've got in the back of your mind? In my case, it would have been those Milgram studies. It would have been about conformity and some psychological studies to back that up. But depending on your area, if you're looking at cognitive psychology, you're particularly interested in memory and other functions to do with that area, then have something in the back pocket that you haven't told them that you know so much about, but when they ask you that next question, you've got something more to give them that's not just the stuff that you've already written down. You don't want to read them a personal statement, you want to connect with them as a person and have a really interesting conversation with them. So I hope that was helpful, I hope that was interesting about what I put together for my personal statement. If you've got any thoughts or questions, please add them into the comment section below. I will get back to you. And in the meantime, remember, if you haven't done so already, to please subscribe to Psychology Unlocked for more videos, some of the more chit-chat nature, like today, and others of the more curriculum-led nature, where we'll be able to break down complex topics in psychology and make them easily understandable and really good for revision. That's why it's worth subscribing. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.